Hey there, PhD friends, and welcome to another video. In today's video, I am interviewing Eric James Stevens, and I'm super excited to have him on. He's the founder of the Educators Network, and he has an incredible story of moving from academia to, first of all, the tech industry, and then now starting his own thing, starting his own organization, which is super exciting to hear him talk about. One of the reasons I'm super excited about this interview is because what Eric is doing is entrepreneurship. He's starting something from scratch that didn't exist before to help educators like himself who want to transition out of academia, who want to change careers, right? And I think that that is amazing. And so you're going to hear him talk about that. If you're watching this in April, which I think you are, all right, then make sure to check out the Branded Scholar Bootcamp, which is a brand new course I created on using LinkedIn to build a personal brand. I think you're absolutely going to enjoy it. The course will be open until April 17th. I'm going to leave the link in the description and on the screen. Go check it out. Let's get right into the interview. Hello, Eric. Thank you for gracing the Bull PhD with your presence. Tell us a bit about your educational background.
Gertrude, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate this opportunity. My educational background, I was in a master's degree program in English, and I was in a Shakespeare class again, right? And then I was looking at my wife's reading list because she was also in a similar program, and she had books like Capitalism and Schizophrenia, and Punishment or Discipline and Punishment by Foucault. And that's when I made the change to rhetoric. Was kind of making a pivot from English to rhetoric, and that's what I got my PhD in from Clemson University as well. I graduated in 2018. With my doctorate degree in rhetoric communication and information design. And my dissertation was essentially, it was on the ethical use of big data. And my site of study was prisons. I collected over 350 inmate handbooks trying to answer the question, which I didn't answer, but I tried to. If we were sending prisoners to a correctional facility and we were giving them correctional handbooks, to what standard are we correcting them? And from there, it's actually how I was able to make a lot of my pivots into what I was able to do later.
Amazing. And you know, to your point that you tried to answer the question, I don't think any academic ever fully answers the question. I think we attempt.
We attempt, I think it's because
we publish what we know.
And I think that we could just do if we had a little bit more focused in our question asking and giving our questions a little bit more context. Academics would just be like scalpels.
Right. But sometimes it can be such a broad question and such a big area of study. So yeah, absolutely. So you got your degree in rhetoric and all the amazing things you just said. So what do you do now for a profession?
Okay. This is, I think, a little bit of a complicated question, right? Okay, so right now, in this moment, I'm a stay-at-home dad, where I'm like hustling, where I'm doing event planning. And I love it because that's like in this space, what I've learned that I'm really, really good at. Like I don't need to recreate resources. Like I can't recreate the kind of resources that you're creating. I don't want to recreate those. But what I can create is a place where people can come together and exchange those resources. And so that's what I'm building right now. On the road to how I got here is a fun story where I transitioned from my job, and I got a job after I graduated in 2018. And I was a writing professor for a couple of years, and then COVID happened and I pivoted into data analytics. And then I did that and I developed those skills. Like I said before, I mean, this is kind of like what I was saying about giving academics context. I remember having a conversation with Chris Catherine, the author of Leaving Academia, and talking with him about like putting an academic who was really just like all of this raw talent, and then putting them in a situation where their talent needs to be contextualized, right? Like in a business setting, and you just become sharp. Like you just get sharper and sharper and sharper. You can start running circles around other people's reports. Like it's kind of like what ended up happening with me. But yeah, to answer your question, like what am I doing right now? I'm in this like, I can feel myself gearing up to do the similar thing to what started this whole thing in the first place 2 years ago of higher ed. But now I'm calling it the Educators Network, which is where educators network.
That's amazing. Building resources, building a network of people that can share this knowledge that most of the time for a lot of academics is never discussed, is never, I remember yesterday or 2 days ago, somebody sending me a message and said, I discovered your YouTube channel. Thank you for sharing stuff that only gets whispered in academia, right? And I'm like,
yes,
why do we whisper about this stuff? So what you're doing is really, really important work. My question for you, you talk about moving from being a writing professor to going into data analysis. Can you share a little bit about that? Because for somebody that has a similar background to yours, or perhaps they're in I have a STEM PhD. So sometimes people assume I only talk to STEM PhDs. So this is why I'm loving the conversations I'm having with non-STEM PhDs and how they have translated their skills into something like data analytics. So let's unpack that a little bit. How did you go from a writing professor to data analytics? And then we'll talk about how the jump from data analytics to what you're doing now.
I did what I did in a very panicked public way. I was making mistakes left and right as I was trying to build something. But I knew that I had to create something. When I got laid off, my wife, she was laid off a couple months later. Just a quick story. She was 8 months pregnant at the time. We had 2 other children. Our lease was up. We had to find someone who'd give us a short-term 6-week lease. We found someone, a little tiny house, 2-bedroom, little tiny house. And we had a baby in that house. We packed up everything we owned into a storage unit in Washington. And then we moved across the country to my parents' basement in Maryland, where I filed for unemployment and my wife filed for unemployment. We were both teaching at the same university. We had a brand new little baby and we didn't know what to do. And so I started higher ed, this hashtag, because I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I was so sad and so depressed. And I knew that I couldn't be the only person who was experiencing that. And I know that I couldn't walk into a room and say, you should hire me because I have a PhD. I had to show people what I was capable of doing. And I think that the STEM folk will have an easier path to an industry job because what they've done involves a lot of more hard tools, hard skills. From the humanities, understand that the thing that you're really, really good at is talking, are those soft skills. Like those are some of the things that you really develop. And we can get into user research and all that kind of thing if we want to. I had to show people what I could do. And I did. I organized, so in August 2020, I organized a 2-day conference with 50 speakers, 19 live workshops, and I live streamed and moderated 9 panels to 3 different social media platforms for $250 that I planned in less than 2 months for free. And that's how I got my job. I decided to keep doing that. I reached out to the CEO of an ed tech company and I asked him the question, what would someone like you want from someone like me who would want to apply at your company? His immediate response was, I don't connect with recruiters. And I was like, that's great. I'm an unemployed academic. Let's chat. And we had a couple conversations. And in one of those conversations, he said, here are all the reasons why I wouldn't hire someone with a PhD. And I gave him all the reasons why I agreed with him. I mean, academia is a toxic place, right? It's not very fun. Let's kind of admit that. Like everybody, let's not get so defensive. But also COVID changed everything. You had people like me who didn't want to leave education. I'm being compelled to. They're amazing hires. You can pick up cheap. And that's what happened. I was an amazing hire and they picked me up cheap. I undervalued myself. I don't think I was underpaid. I think I undervalued myself, right? Which resulted in me being underpaid. But that's how I didn't even get, like, in that conversation, I told him, I was like, I don't know what you do. You give me 3 months, I'll be one of your best employees. I understand. You give me a 3-month learning curve and I'll be an amazing asset at your company. He hired me 3 days later. 5 months later, I got a promotion and a raise because I'd met my 12-month learning goals already. And and that's why I was running reports around what others were doing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what SQL or Tableau was when I got my job as a data analyst. I got my job because I made the argument, I am one amazing son of a bitch. You want me at your company.
Yeah, and you, I think you made a case for the fact that you are an excellent learner because of the background that you have. And one thing that I think I'm beginning to get known for is saying that PhDs are the bosses of learning, right? Literally, we are the bosses of learning. I love a lot of the things that a lot in what you said, and I want to unpack some of it because there's so many lessons that I feel like people watching can learn from this. Number one, you initiated a conversation, right? You initiated a conversation. So many, I find that because our work as academics are very, very specific. Most of the time you're lonely, but you're by yourself. It's just you and 5 other people in the whole wide world who know this topic, right? So usually you tend to, even if you're not naturally introverted, you end up picking up introverted behaviors because of this. And because of this, I find that academics are really, really nervous to start conversations when it's not within their comfort zone, right? So you started a conversation.
Can we unpack that for a second before we move on to the next one? Is that okay? Here's what I want people to recognize is that an academic is like you are an isolated person, right? You are a solopreneur. You have to do so many things on your own. You're not in isolation. Like when you write, if you're writing in isolation, it's not good research. You're writing in conversation with other people. What we do is inherently conversational, but the genre forces us to not start that conversation until it's 200 pages long. LinkedIn allows you to start that conversation in start a micro conversation. I don't need an entire paragraph about why you're quoting someone. Engage that person's quote as conversation and then ask someone else what they think about it. We are nothing but content creators and conversation starters. We just need to change the genre.
I love that. I love that. So I love that. And this is one of the reasons I'm very, adamant about academics using platforms like LinkedIn, like Twitter, like YouTube, to put your work out there, right? Because people don't, like I said, apart from you and the 5 people in the world who know what your topic is about, most people don't get it. Most people don't understand it. So how do you make that accessible? How do you translate that into something that people get and then convince people that you are worth hiring, you are worth them investing into, which I think you did, excellently with the story you told. Another thing I noticed was in your story was bravery, right? You had been laid off. Your wife had been laid off. You had a baby coming. You had to move to your parents' place. Then you held a conference, with whatever resources you had as a way, like there's a lot of bravery and initiative in that whole story. And I wanted to highlight that because again, it's not easy to say, I remember this so well. And, I also remember when I was laid off from my postdoc because funding had run out. And I remember applying for industry jobs and hearing nothing and really feeling like I was worthless. And I don't know how many PhDs go through this. And if you're watching this video and you've ever felt this way, please comment below and let us know or hit the like button or something. But I understand that feeling of I did all the right things. I went to school. I got my degree. So why won't anybody pay attention to me? And so I just want to also honor that. And then you talk about, and then, after this, you can comment on what I just said, but you also talked about undervaluing yourself. And I love that you brought that up because so many of us do undervalue ourselves as PhDs and think that because of the culture in academia, where if you try to get a job outside of academia, well, you're a capitalist. Or I've had people tell me, I tried to go outside of academia and I was told I was a capitalist because now I'm joining the ranks of people making money. People try to leave academia and they're told, well, you must not be a serious academic, or it must be that you were not rigorous enough to stay. And there are all these narratives within academia that discourage people from leaving. And yet the institution is not really serving the people it's trying to keep. Anyway, let me pause there. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm loving everything that you're saying. I think that to kind of work backwards on some thoughts, I think that higher education needs to understand something incredibly important. They are not separate from industry. They're not separate from quote unquote capitalism, right? You are another sector of industry. People who think that they don't have any industry connections, who are your students? Who are the people you're teaching? Who are your friends? Who are your family? You do not exist in isolation. Academics are not unique. They're just like everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. And then I want to go to this idea of, before I go to undervaluing yourself, I want to talk about that first part about being discouraged and everything, and like working through it and how and all of that. I think it's that idea that you said, Gertrude, of saying, I did everything right. Why is this, like, why am I living in my parents' basement on unemployment, having panic attacks? Why? And there's a lot of things that we could do in the situation. Mm-hmm. I narrowed down to two. One is that you can blame other people, and two is that you can take action. Mm-hmm. I think that we need to understand that when we say we've done everything right, and we say, what do we do? In an academic system, an academic value system operates on a different set of jargon, language, and value. What you do in academia only has value if it's been published. Mm-hmm. If it's not published, nothing you have done matters to your professional career, because the work, the aspect of what everything I have done, the only part of the everything I have done statement is it published, which means that your value is determined by a committee you've never met in your entire life. An academic value system does not understand, or they see it and they see it has value. They don't understand it, and they don't understand the value of a dissertation, because nobody's going to read it. 5 people in the world probably aren't going to read your dissertation, right? Like you were talking about before. But they recognize that they're smart people. Like they recognize that there is respect there, but it's not necessarily like we're afraid to engage with those people. It's just like, it's so difficult to engage with these people. In academia, in industry, your value is determined by everything you've done to get that publication. Industry doesn't care about the publication. Everything, all the work, the labs, right? The interviews, all of the research, that is what is based on the skills that you use to develop that knowledge expertise. And then your knowledge expertise just becomes a case study of how amazing you are as an individual.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, it's so many. One of the things I love about what you just said, and we could have this conversation for a really long time, is how I always say academia is very performance based. We want to see your publications. We want to see your speeches. We want to see the conferences you've attended. Whereas industry, like you said, cares about all the skills you acquired on your way to getting those things. How does that help them meet their goals, right? And so, when I people reach out to me and ask about, oh, how do I make this transition? I'm like, you need to completely start thinking differently from how you used to think in academia. When I was applying for industry jobs, I remember one of the biggest mistakes I made was even using my academic CV to apply for jobs. That was, I didn't even know that was a mistake. I thought, well, surely if I have all these publications, people should be impressed, right? But no, it is all the other things. And the moment I made that switch in my mind, and I also ended up going to rewrite my resume into a very, these are the skills I have, and this is how I can help your company meet these goals that you have. That's when things began to change. So that's something I wanted to highlight as well. So now let's talk a bit about so now you move from being a writing professor who lost his job to going into data analytics because you were brave and you initiated conversations. I want to harp on that. You have to start conversations, people. You cannot just put your resume out there online. It's one way, but I'm telling you, this whole networking and having conversations are really, really important. So now you go from data analysis to having the educators network. Let's talk about that and what you do within that organization.
I realized and this is what I said before, I realized in this space that the thing that I'm very good at is bringing people together and event planning. And so the thing that I'm working on now, and this was actually the original idea. Like I remember that little tiny house that we had rented in Washington State where we had just had a baby. I remember walking around this little tiny house, wondering if this is the beginning of it, right? And the idea that I had in my mind is the exact same thing that I wanted to accomplish with higher ed. 2 years ago, I didn't have the credibility or the ethos that I have now to be able to execute on an idea in a way that doesn't charge teachers lots of money. In a way that like my revenue stream is not the teacher. My revenue stream is a corporate sponsor because I'm able to bring these people together in such a way that you want to be able to come in and tap this market. Either one, because you have great technology that can help them, or two, you have great opportunities. But I'm so frustrated. I spent so many years staring at the academic job market before I went on the job market myself. And then I spent several years on it. And then I watched it disappear after I lost my job. And then I look at industry and I see all the things that frustrate me with industry. And I think as an academic, like we were talking about before, I think there are so many things I could do to fix that. Right. But if you were to go and you ask any academic who has an idea like, oh, I could fix that. If you were to say, here's 6 months and $100,000, what are you going to do tomorrow to start fixing that? They won't know what to do. Academics don't know how to implement. That's a problem. If there's anything you should be doing right now, is learn how to implement your ideas. I know how to implement my idea. I know how to create a virtual world using GatherTown where people can come and have serendipitous meetings with people where you can go and network by bumping into somebody. And you can practice all the things that you want to say to someone with different activities. It becomes a networking event that's not, let's go to a webinar and listen to someone speak and then participate in the comments. It's, I'm going to create an avatar and enter a world. And if I don't like this space where people are talking about data analytics, I can go in this space and talk about user research. It is the replication of a conference, right? And we need to recognize that academia, Chronicle of Higher Education just wrote about this like a couple of weeks ago. The academic conference is changing drastically. We've recognized accessibility advantages and the reduction of carbon footprints in academic conferences going online. We don't need to meet face-to-face anymore. Zoom is not cutting it. Other options are not cutting it. The definition of innovation is thinking 10% ahead of the curve. That's where I was with higher ed 2 years ago. The influx of career coaches for academics, there wasn't a lot back then. Now there's so many. I could see that happening, right? I could see how people are going to get organized. And now I know, well, I feel like I do. I know where it's going to go. And I want to create that space because I know what it's like to be a job seeker. And if I can control that world, literally the marketplace world, then I can control what job ads look like. I can coach companies on what it means to hire a teacher, like frame your job search in this way to provide stability. There are so many things that I can do. And now I can create a world where I can execute on those ideas. The core of all of this, right? If there is one takeaway for anybody listening right now, create something you can show someone. You want a job, create something that someone else will want to consume. No one will want to consume your dissertation. They'll watch a 3-minute video about it though.
Yeah, they will. They will. So I was in a meeting last night with some user research, a user research organization, and we're talking about portfolios and stuff like that. And even though I'm not in UX research myself, as a writer, this is important. So whether you're a writer, whether you're a UX researcher, data analytics, ultimately people are going to need to see evidence of your work, right? Like if you say you can do this, what's the evidence? Like, yes, we thank you for showing us your fancy PhD, but what's the evidence you can actually do this? And this is where that showcasing of skills, that building the personal brand comes in. And I'm glad that you brought that up. And I'm glad that you're building this community for academics and for teachers who want to move out of, in that industry into applied industry. I really appreciate that you are doing that. And then you talked about getting corporate. So here's what I love about what you shared so far. I feel like you've used an amalgamation of all the skills that you've acquired over time, right? And then, like you said, you've implemented, right? So yes, I know about event planning. Okay, so what have I done with that? I know about, you went through the personal experience of losing a job and going on the job search market. You have all that experience. So now, how do I actually use that to help other people? And I think that for us as academics, our knowledge, our skills, our experiences all actually make us very, very primed to do some amazing stuff that is not necessarily within the box, but which will still be a disruption, which will still be helpful, even if it's not a big disruption. Let's be honest. Sometimes you don't even need to disrupt anything. You just need to go out there and solve the problem that has been there for like a century, right? So thank you for sharing that with us. Now, for the humanities PhD who's watching this, what is your advice for them, for these PhD students, for maybe their postdoc, maybe they're in their first academic teaching position and they're realizing that this is not going anywhere, this bus is not going anywhere. What would you say they should start doing right now to prime themselves for the market? I think you're the best person to talk about that.
Pick a direction and run. Pick a direction and run. If you try to look back at everything you've ever done and think, I could do so many things, and I'm just going to put myself out there as someone who can do so many things, no one is going to think you can do anything. Pick a path. Like if you want to do customer success, pick a path and run as a customer success manager. And if you don't like it, pivot, right? If you want to do data analytics, pick data analytics and run. And if you don't like it, pivot. But show people that you are acting, that you are doing something. Do not spend money on a credential until you know you need to. Just like you were saying before, we need to show people what we can do. They need to give evidence. A PhD is not evidence. A credential is not evidence. Those are two external entities who are vouching for you and saying, yeah, this person can do this. But when you go and talk to the recruiter, they're going to ask you what you can do. Before you go spending money on a credential, understand what you can do on your own. Go to LinkedIn Learning, and they have free courses and learn, like go to project management, like some of the things we've been talking about, UX research, data analytics. And don't take those courses on what do I need to do to become a data analyst. Take those courses to talk about, I've been doing my research for the past 10 years. How would a data analyst talk about what I do? And then talk about what you do like they would talk about it. You need to translate your experience. You don't need to go out and get 100 hours of certification. You need to talk about the past 100 hours that you've done differently. How do we do that? Audience. You need to understand who your user is, right? Everything that you do needs to show what you are capable of doing, right? If your job search and your LinkedIn profile is a thesis statement, you should hire me because, like in this position that you've already picked, like a specific path, because everything that you do then should support that. The pictures that you take, the posts that you create, right? The words that you use. If you say that you're a people person, show me that you're being a people person by engaging with people, right? If you say storytelling with data, and if I look on your profile and there's no examples of you telling stories with data, I don't believe you. We have so much that we can just take all your research you've done, and just start creating content and say, how would someone, a lay audience, not a dumber audience, right? An audience with a different expertise, So you need to come and speak on the same, like you need to come down and speak on the same level on things. How would you talk about it with them? What is the interesting intersection? And start writing on LinkedIn, start creating content, because LinkedIn's algorithms search words that you enter. The more words you create, the more intentional words you create that are following that path, the more likely your name is going to pop up on an algorithm for someone else who's searching for a job. If you don't know where your path is going, no one is going to be able to help you finish it.
Right. I love that. Choose a path and
run.
And if you don't like it, you can pivot. And I think that that's one of the challenges that I run into when I started talking about, career change and career development and academics. Doing this is people, because in academia, there's this mindset of, I'm going to get that tenure position and I'm going to be there for 50 years. People try to bring that into industry as well. And I'm like, no, you can't think like that. Like here, you can change jobs. These are not tenure positions. Like if you don't like something, you can decide today that, okay, I don't enjoy it. For now, I'm going to do this thing. And then I'm going to learn that, again, commit to a path that I think I'm better suited for, and then pivot to that. So thank you so much for sharing that. This conversation was so insightful. Thank you so much, Eric. If people wanted to find you and what you're doing and get involved with that, where would they go?
The best place to get a hold of me and what I do is to contact me on LinkedIn. That's the bulk of where I do my content creation and where I spend most of my time. But also there's translateacademia.com, which has some, like, a couple of things here and there. I think the most valuable resource that I could provide is my TikTok channel, where I go in and I review academics and teachers' profiles and give them actionable advice in a way that other people can apply it to their own TikToks as well. Because my goal in everything that I do with Translate Academia is to help people. And with a TikTok, I can go in and help one person in an incredibly concrete way that allows other people to learn in the exact same thing. It is exactly what I did with my students. Like I talked about what we did before, right? Taking everything that we've ever done and applying it and finding a new application for it. I know how to assess something really, really quickly so that other people can learn from it. And that's what I'm doing with TikToks.
Amazing. That is, I haven't jumped on TikTok yet, but yeah.
It's so fun. It's the future of content creation, Gertrude.
Yeah.
Get on there.
Get on there. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I'll try. Thank you so much, Eric. This was such an insightful conversation. So for those of you that are looking for resources that Eric just described, you a humanities PhD, I highly recommend that you seek him out. And, he also has some great stuff on YouTube. So please check him out as well. Thank you so much, Eric.
No, thank you so much for having me, Gertrude. I really appreciate these moments. Thank you.